Hi all, this is Dee from Dee Dream Life. Thank you for watching my video. And today, the topic that I'm going to discuss in this video is to do with a topic that has been on my list of to-do in terms of setting and putting together a guideline for people prenatal, people who are pregnant, so women who are pregnant, and what are the do's and don'ts and what are the common misconceptions, particularly to do with prenatal yoga. A lot of people who are pregnant tend to have this concern of what they can do, how much exercise they can do, when they can start doing yoga or any kind of exercise. One of the first questions that I get that is often on everyone's mind is, when can I start to do prenatal yoga? Which trimester? Now, before I jump into answering specific questions, I've got a list of questions and also a list of suggested poses and a list of things that you should avoid. Let me just set something out straight first, that for everyone, particularly for pregnant women, case by case basis is really different. Every person, especially pregnant women, have a very unique experience. And even for the same woman, first time being pregnant versus the second or third pregnancy could be completely a different experience as well. So this makes a teacher, a prenatal yoga teacher, and this video particularly tricky for me because I have to be very careful about how I give guidance, because first things first, just like anything else, make sure you refer to your doctor. Your doctor is the first point of contact in terms of any complication and in terms of any physical advice. Okay? Now, there are so many different questions that I commonly get. I'm going to try to address as many of them in this video as quickly as possible. And if there's anything else you want to know further, happy to have one-on-one consultations, or PM me, DM me, ask me further questions. Happy to try to help as many as possible. Now, first question is, when can I start? A lot of people say I should be able to start in my second trimester. There is no rule of thumb when you can start and how much exercise you can do. But generally, women who have problems, especially first time pregnancy, okay, there is a big difference between first time and subsequent times I've observed. First time pregnancy, naturally a lot of women are a lot more nervous. This is one thing I've observed. And the nervousness comes around with not really knowing what to do at all. Not just about their own body, but also in general, like they are a bit in a state of shock. They don't know what to do. Everything is new. Everything is first time. So they tend to err on the side of caution, which means if you're not sure what to do, don't do it. That's how people normally tackle the question of, should I do something? And yes, that's in a way one way of doing it, which I think is a safe approach. The other thing to bear in mind is that if you're experiencing a lot of morning sickness during your first trimester, naturally your energy level is quite low, and there is a tendency to not want to do anything, to not want to go out, to not want to move. But one rule that I strongly recommend and believe is that pregnant women need to move. So gentle movements and more movement, all else being equal, is better than no movement. We'll go down in more detail of what kind of movements are preferred at different stages later part of this video, but for now let's just stick with more movement is better than less, all else equal. Why? Well, firstly, because a lot of the time the congestion that you feel, the feeling of morning sickness or uneasiness or feeling like vomiting or nausea or swelling of the body, extra water retention, has all got to do with the key concept of things not flowing in your body properly. So when you think about it, your body is adjusting to having to feed and nourish an extra human being inside you as a pregnant woman. And when that happens, you are actually needing a lot more blood, a lot more nutrients, and your body kind of needs to be more efficient, because you are no longer just surviving for one, you're surviving for two. And the efficiency of the blood flow is more crucial than ever before. And what helps and aids with efficient blood flow and energy, because you need a lot of energy. Conceiving a baby, building a human in your body requires a lot of energy. So again, going back into the topic of energy and flow of prana, which I covered in the video that I did yesterday, which was called Breathwork, Pranayama, and Alternate Nostril Breathing, okay? Which I will touch on a bit more later during this video. Flow of energy is so important, therefore move. Gentle movements like walks. Generally, you should be able to walk unless you are really, really suffering from some kind of complication. Long walks by default is something you can easily do. Now, next thing what I want to talk about is breathing. Okay, so this goes back to my video yesterday about breathing, and now I'm going to tie it into why it's so important for pregnant women to try to breathe more and breathe more deeply. Okay, so some of the problems that women face while they are going through their pregnancy, and we're still talking about the first trimester here, is that they are feeling like there is something that is growing within them, and the womb may be actually causing pressure. So either downward pressure, as the baby is growing, it starts to push downwards and exert force onto the pelvis, or it may be pushing upwards and creating that kind of feeling of space constraint and pushing upwards towards your diaphragm, which then means that your chest feels congested. Okay, and well, since we're still talking about the first trimester here, because the baby is not that big yet, so probably you don't feel it that much yet, right? So why is it then important to start breathing? Well, while the baby is still growing and your body's starting, like, first thing, as we talked about before, is that a baby needs a lot of energy because it is growing, it is building itself, and you need a lot of blood to be pumping down there to the baby, to the fetus, for it to grow and develop. And blood circulation needs to be more efficient than ever before, and blood circulation carrying lots of oxygen, carrying lots of energy, and also removing toxins from the body very efficiently is very, very important at this point. Secondly, when you are training your breath and you're making your breath longer and deeper, you are training yourself to be able to push the baby out later, because as you know, or you may not know, when you're actually giving birth, natural labor, we're talking about here, a cesarean operation is another big topic of its own that I'll cover hopefully later. Natural birth obviously needs a lot of push, okay? And that pushing is actually you trying to draw in a lot of breath and then using that breath and that muscular strength to push out. So there's a lot of breath and body connection that really helps you to go through that pain and also that effort of pushing the baby out. So starting with breathwork exercises, deepening your breath and working on your breath, deepening that breath, and creating that body and breath connection with breathing in, pushing, breathing out, contracting is really going to create that muscle memory that's really going to be quite useful when you're going to be pushing out the baby in 9 months. All right, now next thing why breath is so important also is that a lot of the time I face mothers who are having trouble sleeping, and this is quite common. Pregnant women tend to not be able to sleep because they are either experiencing a lot of anxiety within them, nervousness within themselves, or there is a lack of synchrony between their own body rhythm and clock and the baby's, which means it's time for you to sleep, but the baby may not be feeling sleepy, and vice versa. So this trying to synchronize your rhythm, your body clock with the baby's body clock is quite a problem sometimes. And if you have quite a hyperactive baby and you know that baby is quite hyperactive or active in general, and it's kicking and it's buzzing and it's doing stuff all the time, you know it, you feel it, and you're tired and your baby doesn't want to rest. So breathing exercises and meditation becomes quite useful in this situation. I have been teaching quite a few pregnant women Yoga Nidra, and Yoga Nidra is basically sleep meditation, really useful. And I hope that you guys can use the online resource. I'm going to be posting a free Yoga Nidra audio recording on my YouTube channel, so you can listen to it while you are trying to go to sleep, which hopefully will calm the baby down as well. During Yoga Nidra, the one that I will be posting is a general one for everyone, but there will be specific ones that I can do that are specifically targeting trying to first synchronize the baby's rhythm with yours, talking to the baby during the Yoga Nidra, realizing that the baby is actually a living being, okay, and that the baby has a mind, a body, and a spirit of its own, and it may not necessarily be gelling with yours completely because it is, after all, a different human being. And also during this sleep meditation, it's really trying to calm the mother down because especially in first pregnancies, mothers tend to be very nervous in general. Just a lot of different thoughts and worries about what to do, how to do things. Okay, now moving on to the next topic. A next question that I commonly get from people is, what kind of exercises should I do to enhance or to help with my pregnancy, especially with labor? Okay, now why is prenatal yoga so popular and such a recommended series of exercise for pregnant women? Because specifically it is able to target and help women in opening up the hips, widening the cervix, or normally it's just the pelvis and the hip region that the cervix will take its time to open during labor itself. Now, a lot of women who have naturally small hips do experience more difficulty giving birth, and this becomes a key focus of a prenatal yoga class unless you're not giving birth naturally. So I've had situations where people already know, many women already know beforehand that they will not be giving birth naturally, then the class no longer has to revolve around hip opening. So now let's stick on to the scenario that you're giving birth naturally first. Some of the things that you can really do is, for example, first thing I have on my list is a three-legged dog. So I'm not going to demonstrate it to you because you can easily just Google three-legged downward dog. So it's your downward dog with one leg up towards the ceiling. And this is a really good pose for you because it really helps to widen the legs and also open the hips and also train the strength of the bottom segment of your body, your hips downwards, that is required for keeping that baby in its place and also for the ability to push out the baby. And some people do this pose by holding onto a chair. So if you Google, you will see that there are a lot of recommended pictures of doing it either facing the wall, where you're putting your hands on the wall and kicking one leg up. So basically just hands on the wall and then kicking one leg up, or holding onto a chair or a table and kicking one leg up. Why? Because one of the things that pregnant women fear the most, which is actually a legitimate concern, is losing your balance while you're doing a pose, right? Because you don't want to lose your balance and fall when you're pregnant. And if your balance is normally not so good. But even if your balance is normally good, carrying an extra load will change the dynamics within your body, and you're not so used to carrying that kind of extra load. So be extra careful with your balance while you're doing yoga poses. So highly recommend you holding on to a chair, a stable chair of course, not a flimsy one, or holding onto the wall, or holding onto a table, so that when you do something like that where you kick one leg up and you're on one leg only, that you have something very sturdy to hold on to. Okay, so next thing that I really highly recommend, very simple, cat and cow poses. So basically on all fours, hands and knees, and just having your head up, looking up, and then flexing your spine, looking down. You can easily Google cat and cow pose again. I'm not going to demonstrate it because these are all, or maybe I should demonstrate it actually. So cat and cow, breathing up and breathe out down. So this really helps with just helping strengthen the back of your spine. Now, why is the strength of your spine so important during pregnancy? Because your spine is going to be needed to carry that extra load of baby in front of you. And if your spine is weak, then you're going to be having a lot of trouble carrying the baby while walking upright. Okay, so spine strengthening is very important, as well as hip opening. And the other things you can do is, if you're good with your balance, you can stay in that position of tabletop, and then you can extend one hand up and then extend the opposite leg up. Okay, and that will help again to strengthen your spine. And all these Pilates inspired movements from the tabletop position, very good for your spine. Okay, now for spinal strengthening exercises, when we are not pregnant, we normally lie down on the belly and do things like locust and Superman pose, where you're lying down and you're lifting your head, hands and your legs off the ground, and that helps to strengthen the spine. But when you're pregnant, one of the key things you can't do is lie down on your belly. So those poses are not accessible to you, which is why what I've just suggested before is really good for you. Okay, now let's go into what you can't do before I go deeper into what you should do. Okay, a lot of people who practice yoga commonly, generally speaking, would love to continue to practice in the same classes that they are used to going. And there's nothing wrong with doing what you normally doing. So that's why it becomes so important to be aware of what you can't do, so that when you still attending the same yoga classes that you normally go to while you're being pregnant, you just need to be aware of what you should avoid doing and alter the movements. Okay, so 5 broad categories of things that you should really be careful and avoid. First thing is what I've just mentioned before, lying on your belly. So these are what we call prone poses. Completely a no-no, okay? For obvious reasons, you don't want to exert your baby against the floor. Second thing that you should be very careful about is back bends. So back bending basically is something like this, where you're bending your back. And when you're doing that, why you should be very careful is that, especially if you're a very flexible person to begin with and you're a regular yogi, that means you have quite a lot of range of motion when you do your back bend, is that you may actually bend backwards and stretch that belly, that baby out, and that's not what is good for it. Okay, so you have to be very careful. And if you really want to go into back bend, the one that I would recommend you of all the back bends that are available would be a camel. But bearing in mind that depending on how big you are at the time, you can always keep your hands by your hips and just have a gentle one instead of going all the way down and really stretching the baby out. Okay, so that's the second thing to be careful of. Third thing, inversions. Now, inversions generally is not advised for pregnant women. Why? Now, there are some schools that are like fully okay with you doing inversions while you're pregnant. I am aware and know of some yoga teachers who still completely go into their headstands and handstands when they are pregnant. Bearing in mind that yoga teachers are normally very, very, very in tune with their own body, which means that if they're sure they can do something, it's fine. So that's really not the best practice, especially for people who are non-yoga teachers. And if you are currently not an inversion expert and you're trying to go into an inversion, obviously being pregnant is really not the time to start experimenting with inversions. But if you're used to doing inversions, why you should not get into inversions is partly because your baby is in a certain position, and when you go upside down, you are actually going to affect the direction of the baby, how it's sitting. Okay, but there are some schools of thought that say that during the 8th month, when the baby is actually changing its direction to move its head down towards the cervix, that's when you should do a lot of inversions. So there are some schools that prescribe that, but do that only if you really, really recommend it to, and only if you're a very comfortable inversion practitioner. Okay? Next thing to be very careful about when you're pregnant, twists. So deep twisting, especially twisting of the spine, is very it's a contraindication, so you should be very careful. You should judge for yourself. Obviously, in the early stages of pregnancy, it's not as much of a risk versus when you are deeper into your pregnancy and your belly is much bigger. Okay, so gentle twists, not big deep twists. Okay, so be very careful around that, because anything that creates compression around the uterus, okay, is not good. But open twists are okay. Okay, so if your legs, let's say your legs are open and you're not actually crushing the belly into something as you're twisting, is much better than a twist that's actually moving the baby towards something that is actually constricting and pushing against the baby. All right, now next thing is core work, belly workouts. Core work has to be performed very, very carefully. I'm just referring to my notes here because I've made notes for this. I just want to make sure I cover everything succinctly. We don't want to contract the muscles around the abdominal region because the baby is over there. Side core work is okay, like side plank. If you really want to make sure that your core is still strong, you can go into side planking, side crunches, that's right, if you want to maintain the strength of your core. Just be very careful with crunches and all that, because normal crunching up and down, you're really just going on the baby, okay? And you don't want that. All right, so now that we've gone through all the 5 main things that you really need to be aware of when you're exercising, and this doesn't just apply during yoga, it applies to all movements and all classes that you attend. Now we can go into things in detail of what you should be doing more of, okay? For example, let's go down my list. Breathing exercises I covered before, very good. Counting of breath, calming yourself down, synchronizing your rhythm. So there's another exercise that I do for pregnant women where you put your hand on top of the belly and you start to listen for the heartbeat of the baby. And then you put your other hand on top of your own heart and you start listening to your own heartbeat. And then you kind of try to equalize both of them and synchronize them. And you actually can control your own heartbeat, because if you calm down and breathe longer and deeper, your heartbeat will also naturally slow down. So this exercise is actually you trying to transfer your calming energy to the baby, or inversely calming yourself down to match the calming energy of the baby. Okay, and once you get very good at this, you can really feel it, and you can really feel that the heartbeat will start to go boop 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 synchronously, and that's what you're trying to achieve. And it's a very lovely meditation, and you can even talk to the baby if you want while you're doing this. Talking to the baby, let's talk about that. What do we say to the baby? Now, I once taught a woman who was really struggling to give birth, and she was already due. She was due for natural birth. She was admitted to hospital a few times, and her water was kind of breaking, and she went, and it was a false alarm. She got home, and then she had to go again, and then she got home. It was a bit frustrating. So then when I was engaged to help her to get the baby out by performing different yoga exercises, one of the things that I did was talk to the baby and taught her how to talk to the baby. And some of the things that I recommend is visualizing a happy family environment, because a lot of the time when the baby refuses to come out, it's partly because there's fear within the baby, because it's feeling very comfortable in your womb. It's very safe. It's living in a bubble, literally, right? Protected. Lots of nice fluid around it. No need to fend for food and shelter on its own. So it is very, very aware that being inside you is safe versus being outside you, which is new territory and not having a mother to cling on to anymore, right? Remember, babies are smart, right? They're human beings. They are instinctive. So if you're really having trouble pushing the baby out for some reason and the baby's overdue, you can actually start to talk to the baby, or even before the baby is due, you can start carrying out this kind of mental visualization where you are telling the baby and talking to the baby either through visuals of your own, imagining a happy environment, a warm, cozy, loving environment. I like to get my students to think about the father of the baby, if you have a good relationship with the father, and to kind of send messages, visuals, images, and even talk to them verbally and say, you have a great father, or siblings as well, siblings that the baby may have if that's not your first child, siblings, and say, hey, everyone's excited. You have aunties, you have uncles, you have grandpa, you have grandma, you have me, and come out, please, because we are all waiting for you, and you will have a wonderful home, a very safe and loving environment. You do not have to fear, and you do not have to be nervous about coming out into this brand new world. Okay, so that's the mental spiritual aspect of it. Now, next thing you can do, chanting. For those of you who believe in chanting, this is very good for you. Bija mantra chanting. Now I can create another video to talk all about chanting and Bija mantra chakra, but today for this one I just want to tick it off and cover it since it's on my list just to be complete. You can chant Lam and Vam. So Lam is for your first chakra, Muladhara chakra, which is at the anus rectum area, the root area, and pelvis as well. And then second one, even more relevant, is the Vam Bija mantra, which is relating to the second chakra, which is your Swadhisthana, which is relating to the sexual and reproductive organs. Now, why do these chants work? Now, these chants are not magical, woozy witchcraft things. These chants are actually vibrational sounds that stimulate that area and sending energy. So you can try it yourself if you don't believe me. When you say the letter with the syllable va, V-A-M, vam, you can actually feel it if you say it if you actually say the syllable really loudly and clearly. You can feel that the sound is actually generated from your uterus area, your reproductive basin. Okay, so that's what you can do 9 times or multiples of 9 is what we believe in, or just however many times you can. Vam. Okay, again, if you want more details of how to do it, happy to have a chat with you. Next thing, just to go down my list, circling your hips in tabletop. So we were in tabletop before, hands and knees on the floor, on all fours. And let me just show you quickly how this is done. Hands and knees, and you're going to circle the hips, making circles with the hips. Sorry for my very un-yogic pants that I'm wearing. Okay, so circling the hips, very good. Okay, now next down the list, we've talked about the one leg up from tabletop, okay, or using a chair. Equestrian pose, basically this, let me show you. One leg forward and the other knee on the floor and lunging forward with the knee on the floor. This helps to open the hip and pelvic area. So widening the hips, opening the pelvis, and also the cervical areas, the cervix. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't use the word cervical because cervical is normally related to the back of your neck. All right, next thing, pelvic tilts. Pelvic tilts lying down. So when you lie down, your pelvis region, you can basically push and pull your sacrum forward and back just to rock the spine gently forward and back to ease the pelvis, the pelvic region. Okay, next thing, bridges. So you can Google these bridge. I think a lot of people who practice yoga know what a bridge is. Very good. Squeezing a tennis ball between your legs, clenching your buttocks. Okay, very good for trying to toughen up the muscles. These are Kegel exercises, by the way. So Kegel exercises, squeezing a tennis ball between your thighs or your knees while you are in your bridge position helps to strengthen the pelvic floor and helps, well, many people use the Kegel exercises for other reasons like tightening up their vagina for better sex or whatever they do these days, but these exercises are really good, especially when you're preparing yourself for childbirth, because it will give you strength in your pelvis and your pelvic floor and the muscles that you need to really push when you need to. All right, next thing, let me go through my list now. Bouncing on a ball. So what ball are we talking about here? The Pilates ball, the exercise ball that's like about this big, right? And you can sit on it and bounce. But please do it carefully in the sense that don't fall off the ball. Again, falling is a no-no. So When I do it with my students, I hold on to my students. I actually sit on a ball opposite to my student and we bounce together. Bouncing while sitting on these rubber balls really helps to shake the baby up, loosen it up a bit, especially very good when you're right about to give birth. Okay, we're still talking about natural birth here. Next thing, Shavasana. So Shavasana, if you don't know what Shavasana is, it is almost everyone's favorite pose in yoga. It is the one where you lie down at the very end and sleep like a baby. Now, since you're pregnant, you cannot do Shavasana as how normal people do it. Meaning you are not supposed to lie on your back. So how do you do it? Well, in the first few months of your pregnancy, when you're not so big, lying on your back is not such a big problem. But as your baby becomes bigger, your spine will come under more pressure as you lie down straight. So a few options that you have. One is to lie on your side. Now, which side? The left side. Okay, so lying on your side with a bolster between your knees will really be a very good comfortable position for Shavasana. The other pose that is really good for resting is Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound ankle pose. This pose is basically you lying on your back with your knees bent and then your knees flared out to the side with your feet together. Okay, Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound ankle pose. You can put blocks under your knees, and you can also put cushions under your head, under your shoulders, under your lower back. Support yourself with lots of cushions, bolsters, and pillows whenever you are practicing yoga, especially during the resting poses. Next thing is when you're sitting, also use the cushions, use as many props as you have. Bring lots of cushions and pillows and blankets when you are going to a yoga class when you're pregnant, because you will need that extra support of your spine and of your joints with the pressure of the baby. All right, now it's 37 minutes in. What else can I share? Okay, now final last words. Swelling and water retention. One of the main things I want to cover off today as well. Some women towards the end of the pregnancy will start to feel a lot of water retention and swelling of the toes, the feet, the ankle, the knees, the hands. And to really try to work on this, few suggestions I have. Ginger water is really good. So ginger is very good, a natural release of what we call cold energy, cold wind, and also anti-inflammatory. Okay, turmeric is very good, natural anti-inflammatory. Or just take any Nurofen or NSAID, right? Natural anti-inflammatory. Okay, so that's one thing that commonly happens towards the end of your pregnancy. The next thing that I want to cover is that's right. So when do you stop doing vigorous exercise? Listen to your body, you know best. It really depends on how fit you are prior to your pregnancy. So if you were very, very fit and active right before your pregnancy, chances are you're going to retain about 70 to 80% of that fitness level while you're pregnant. Okay? If you consistently move, you will maybe have to slow down by 20, 30, 40% as you go along your pregnancy. That's a rule of thumb. Again, remember, this is not rocket science. It's not exact. Use your own judgment. You know best. The other golden rule is do what you feel right. The moment you feel something is uneasy, like you're starting to feel out of breath, you're starting to feel dizzy in any class, in any activity, stop. Stop whatever you're doing and just rest. Okay, now the child pose, obviously you can't do the child pose when you're pregnant because the child pose requires your belly to be on the floor. Okay, so remember that the child pose, which is a commonly used yoga pose for resting, is no longer accessible to you. So your other option would be to lie and be on your side, as I mentioned before, on your left side, okay, not on your right side. Why? Because of the the position of the baby and also the heart. Okay, now the next thing I want to cover is what you can eat. Now that's a huge topic, and obviously that really depends person to person, but as a general rule, I think a lot of you know more than I do that you shouldn't be eating lots of raw food. Okay, so raw food and obviously alcohol and smoking, these are things that are normal general tips of what to not do during your pregnancy, or very sparingly if you do it. Okay, I think I have covered everything that I want to cover in this video. Okay, and generally I think one last final piece of advice for pregnant women is, if you are feeling like you need to move more, do go find a teacher who can really work on you one-on-one. I'm not saying this because I want more business for private classes. I'm saying this because more than anyone else, generally, pregnant women really benefit from one-on-one classes, because even in a prenatal class, every pregnant woman is experiencing different conditions. So it's really hard for a prenatal yoga teacher to set a class that is able to target all of the students in one go. And therefore, that's the reason why I have heard the feedback that it's so hard for people to find prenatal yoga classes. It's not that there are not enough prenatal yoga teachers around. In fact, a lot of yoga teachers by default are trained to teach prenatal. But there are not a lot of public yoga for prenatal, because there are not enough numbers to make it a slot that is worth putting on a regular basis, and two, that normally people find it more beneficial to do one-on-one private sessions. Okay, all right, that's all I have to say, and I'm going to let you go, and I hope that this video is useful to all of you who are pregnant or about to get pregnant, or have a friend who's pregnant, or has a daughter who's pregnant. Whoever you know who's pregnant, do share this video out, and if you find this useful at all, thank you for watching, and I really welcome all your questions, all your feedback, all your comments. You can write it down below, or you can message me privately. Follow my Instagram at Dee Dream Life, or like my Facebook page, DEEDREAMLIFE. My website is available as well if you want to check out rates for private classes and consultation. And I'm signing out. Namaste.